Again, for our viewers tuning in from the webcam, I'm Officer Derek Lang with the Tampa Police Department, just returning from lunch here at the Smile Conference. We're going to get started this afternoon with Ken Smith. Is going to be our panel moderator for a panel discussion on managing the virtual life of real. No?
Mobile apps.
Mobile apps. I apologize. Mobile apps for public safety. So I'll let him take over and finish from there.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. We got our technical issues sorted out, and what I want to do is just give you a quick overview of what we're going to do for the next 90 minutes. So hopefully some of you can start writing questions now for a little bit later. First, we're just going to introduce everybody on the panel. We're going to get Chief Reyes back in just a moment. Then we're each going to give a small presentation, various different presentations from the public sector side, from the private sector side. Then we're going to talk about three primary topics. And again, please get out your pens. We'd love to make this an interactive discussion. The three topics are going to be with respect to mobile apps for public safety utility. What makes an app useful and why? Security. What are your primary security concerns and how do you address them either from the private side or the public side? And then lastly, looking at the development and evaluation process. Hopefully some people here are involved in an evaluation process right now, and what we'd love to have you do is raise your hand and let's discuss how that is going along, and we'll share our thoughts as well. So just to get going, do we have Chief Reyes?
How are you, Ken?
Hey, Eddie, how are you?
Good, sir. Good to see you again.
Great. So why don't you just give a quick introduction of yourself, then we'll go down the panel, and then we're going to do the presentations.
Okay, very quickly. Good afternoon, each and every one of you. My name is Eddie Reyes. I'm the Deputy Chief of Police here in Alexandria, Virginia. Currently in charge of patrol operations. For the last 4 years, I've been in charge of the Administrative Services Bureau that had responsibility of all technology, data, and analysis for the police department. Just very quickly, by way of introduction, I've been entrenched. As you know, the IACP is located here in Alexandria, Virginia, and I work very closely with them, being their subject matter expert on technology and analysis. And I also serve as the region's subject matter expert on technology and communications for the National Capital Region Chiefs of Police and Sheriffs. And I'm very, very happy to be here because I think I'm going to really balance this presentation. I know all of you there are very tech savvy, very social media savvy. I bring the other side of that is that in the last 4 years, even though I was in charge of the technology portfolio for the police department, I managed to do that without a Facebook, Twitter account, and really managed to stay off of Facebook, or I'm sorry, off of social media. So, but I'm starting to get it, and I'm starting to go in that direction. And I know that other chiefs, some much older than I, are starting to get it. And I think I'm going to bring the other side of what you all are there to receive today.
That's great. Thanks, Eddie. It's a good validation for what the mayor was saying earlier today. Andrew?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Tampa. My name is Andrea Davis, and I work with the Tampa Police Department. And we are so glad that you could all make it this day. I work in the Public Information Office, and I was tasked 2 years ago. Can everyone hear me? I was tasked 2 years ago by the chief to come up with a mobile app, and I did. And hopefully through this, I can talk to you about some of the challenges we had, what has worked well, what didn't work well, in case you all are thinking about getting mobile apps.
And Claude?
My name is Claude Shear. I'm with VizSafe. VizSafe is a two-way social media platform designed to connect citizens with first responders, law enforcement agencies, and other groups in their community who share interest in improving the quality of community safety. We don't see ourselves specifically as a law enforcement app, but we do think that the content that's created as a result of the distribution of our app is extremely valuable, and we've created a number of back-end tools to improve the value of VizSafe to the law enforcement community. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, but our company background is actually in providing technology tools, sensor network management tools to law enforcement, DOD, DHS, and others. So that's who we are.
Great, thank you, Claude. And my name is Ken Smith. I am the founder and head of product for a brand new company that is called Reyes. I am a 7-time entrepreneur. I just got the bug and I can't stop. I have also taught and coached students at the MIT Enterprise Forum, at Harvard. I am a business plan reviewer for a group called Springboard Networks, which is high net worth women investing in women-led businesses. So I've seen an awful lot of apps, probably 2 or 3 dozen, I'd say, in the past 6 months, evaluating their business plans, their technologies, and looking how they're bringing those particular technologies to market. So what we want to do is now, I want to kick off with Eddie and his presentation. And again, we're going to go right down the line with Andrea and then Claude and myself. So, Chief.
Thank you very much, Ken. So, as I said earlier, and thank you for the introduction. One of the things that I've been recently dealing with as the face of technology for the ICP is having to come up with a solution for NG911. For those of you that are not familiar with the public safety communications side of the house, NG911 is an evolving technology for the call centers, in which the call centers in the future are going to start receiving text, photos, and videos compared to the traditional voice emergency calls for service that they receive now. So obviously that's a big transition for most PSAPs, most 911 call centers. But as we know, today's generation, the Y generation that we serve today, they can't wait for NG911 to be here. They're not only the developers like what are in this room, but the consumers, the people that need to text because of emergency conditions or need to send in a photo because they have a photo of a person that just robbed them of their wallet or their purse. They want to send that in. And we have to be in a position to receive that. And so working with the ICP and other organizations like the SMILE conference, we've obviously started looking at mobile app applications. And obviously I've been in contact with Paul and Ken, who I consider pioneers in the mobile app application deployment for public safety use. And so most of us that are in the police service recognize having to do so much more with so fewer bodies. As I speak to you today, I just last week I was transferred to Chief of Patrol, and I inherited a bureau that was 18 bodies below minimum staffing. And so how do I continue to deliver the same number or the same level of service as the previous chief had with that many fewer bodies? And so that's the question that police departments and call centers and fire, literally public safety has to answer. How are we going to be able to do more with less? The obvious solution is technology. And so mobile apps in a public safety environment is, to me, one of our quick monkey wrenches, if you will, that can help us fix a lot of problems. And so that's one of the reasons I have recently started getting really engaged and really interested in the mobile app deployment for public safety environments. Obviously, keeping our personnel safe is the priority when launching technology. I never would want to launch a technology without keeping our people safe. So I can't tell you as a patrol officer, when I was responding to a, let's say, a burglary or robbery from person, lights and siren blaring, I probably passed multiple suspects on the way to the call, and I didn't realize that that was the person who just committed that offense. Today's generation wants to send you the captured video or photo of the person that they just captured. And so now as I'm responding to that call for service, perhaps I now would be able to make an apprehension or just make myself safer and not to approach someone that I thought was an innocent bystander who might actually be involved in the crime. So making our people more effective and safer with mobile apps for public safety is obviously one of the priorities when we're considering deploying a mobile app solution here in our organization. However, like with any technology, any new deployment has some unforeseen and unintended consequences. So one of the things that we're doing here, we've been known nationally for deploying the latest and greatest technology, whether it was the latest land mobile radio system, the latest CAD system, the latest mobile data computer system. We usually were on the cutting edge of technology. And this is one where we're cautiously taking the sideline and letting other fine departments like Toronto and Ottawa and, of course, Tampa toy around with this technology before we see what the unintended consequences are. One of the unintended consequences that I see here for our organization is just staffing. We know that when we deploy these types of applications out there to the field, people are going to start using them, and they're going to start using them heavily. And we think it's just going to multiply calls that traditionally would not come in because people want to remain anonymous. Now with some of these applications, they're likely to come in because there's more anonymity with someone calling in a call for service, for example. But the flip side of that coin is an application like Reggie that we've been looking at. If a person is able to catalog and inventory all their personal belongings before they become the victim of a crime, then when we arrive, all that information, all that very useful information has already been done ahead of time, and the police don't have to spend hours upon hours like I used to taking a basic police report. It's pretty much already done for you. As I see it, this is my third CAD records management system that I'm working on right now. We are currently working with 2 vendors to deploy a new CAD RMS system here for the city of Alexandria. It's going to be very, very robust and very resilient. It's going to be a CAD RMS system that's going to encompass police, fire, and sheriff. And it's going to really allow us for a police car to talk to a fire truck to talk to the hospital, and for a police officer to get jail records information before they arrive to the booking area. That's the type of robust information that we have available at our disposal now. The weakness that I see with mobile apps is that there's no real CAD RMS interface between the apps and our traditional CAD RMS systems. That's, to me, is a very big hump that we have to get over. But I know that in talking to Paul and Ken, that is something that is obviously being looked at very seriously, because we know that in the law enforcement and the public safety environment, our CAD systems and our records management systems is what drives us. We can't respond to the call if the call is not in CAD, and we can't get the record later on if it's not in our records management system. So a very clean, seamless interface between these mobile apps and our traditional CAD RMS systems is what's very important for us. I'd like to switch over to the next slide and talk about an application that we're actually using here in the National Capital Region. So for those of you that are not familiar with the National Capital Region, we're an area of about 6 million people made up of 2 states, Maryland and Virginia, and of course the District of Columbia sandwiched right in the middle. And so in between all of those, we have about 21 local municipalities that do the lion's share of police work here in the Of course, we have a lot of federal agency and state agency presence, but the day-to-day work is done by local municipal police forces and fire departments. And so to that end, we have a lot of small law enforcement agencies within our city, but yet we operate the PSAP for all those other law enforcement agencies. So when someone dials 911 from the Northern Virginia Community College, it's going to come to our PSAP, even though they have their own police force, as an example. And so, so these, for example, the Northern Virginia Community College has deployed an application that is a workaround NG 911 because they don't receive the traditional 911 calls for service or calls for service for that matter. They have deployed an application that allows students to text, photo, or video directly into their call center, and quite frankly, that's what students prefer to do. So it's working quite well for them in their application. This application also allows authorized family and friends to watch them as they're moving around. So for safety reasons, if you're out late and about, walking around at night, and you want an extra set of eyes on you as you're moving around the campus, and I know some students don't want that because they don't want their parents to see where they're at. But this is a safety feature that when you do want it, you can obviously activate it, and you can track the movement of that person once you've given that person rights. The pros and cons of discreet chat is that traditional calls that would not have gotten reported via a landline now are possibly going to get reported because the callers or the reporters feel they have that anonymity to report a loud party, to report that vandalism in progress that normally would not have gotten reported, but if not for this application. The downside to that, as I've been talking to the chief of police on that community college, is that life-threatening emergencies are also being reported via this app. And obviously, for those of us that are used to responding to life-threatening emergencies, we want that real-time by voice so that we can get immediate attention. Because this application sits on a desktop It doesn't get monitored like a phone would, a traditional 911 phone would. And so therefore, someone reporting in a life-threatening emergency over a mobile app could possibly get a delayed response because it's not being reported in a traditional manner. So that's the downside of being discreet with reporting calls for service. The other nice feature about this app that we're seeing here is that you can send out a large broadcast regarding storms, regarding a person that we're on the lookout for. Once these students subscribe to this app, you can very quickly reach out. It would be the equivalent for those agencies that have a reverse 911 feature within their call center to very quickly send out a broadcast to all the subscribers of this mobile app of any emergency, whether it's weather-related, man-made emergency, or looking for a dangerous person on campus. That's one of the nice features of this app. But as I said, this app, while it has a good application on a college or university or a smaller setting like that, it would be troublesome, I think, for a larger organization like ours. We're just currently understaffed right now as I speak to you, and when you introduce a new technology, then the floodgates open. Right now, sometimes on a very busy weekend, we have a hard time keeping up with call volume just with traditional E911 telephony system, let alone if you deploy an application like this. And then the other unintended consequence of this deployment is that it's going to require enhanced training. Obviously, when someone's talking to you on the phone, you more or less get a sense for just by the tone, by their deflection of their voice, just what is going on in the background. In a text message, it's kind of hard to depict just how real the emergency is when someone texts over, "I need help," and then you don't get anything else. At least with a traditional call, you at least know where that person is calling from. And so these are some of the unintended consequences of this type of deployment. The last thing that I'll mention that requires training, and that is the terminology and the lingo that generation uses. What we've seen is, I'll take my two teenagers as an example. When they text a message to me, it's usually in 3-letter acronyms. And I have to sit there and scratch my head, and what does this mean? And then at the end of the day, I have to call them by voice to say, what are you trying to tell me? And that is one of the potential unintended consequences when someone texts to 911 and the dispatcher does not know those 3-letter acronyms. They're eventually probably going to try to reach them by voice because they don't understand what the person is trying to convey. So these are just some of the potential unintended consequences. The application that I'm talking about is an application by the name of VizSafe. It's located here in Virginia. I have visited their headquarters facility here, and they're getting tremendous traction with colleges and universities and sporting venues where you have a controlled environment and you're able to send a text to a very dedicated location. Ken, do we pause for questions or do I go all the way through?
I think we're going to go on to the other presentations. We're going to have questions a bit later, so if you can hang with us.
Okay.
Got more slides? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. If you're not done,
No, I'm not done. But just before I moved on to the next slide, I wanted to see if we wait for questions now or take them at the end.
I think we'll have questions at the end.
Okay, good enough. And how are we doing for time? Tell me how much time we have left.
I would give another 5 minutes.
Another 5 minutes, Eddie.
Okay, then let me speed it up. Okay, moving on to the next app that I'm talking about is a personal property registration app. And really, one of the biggest things that we deal with here in the city of Alexandria is larceny. There's a lot of theft. Alexandria is a very, very safe community. But unfortunately, because it's an affluent community and people feel very safe in this community, they tend to leave their personal belongings unattended. Laptops, phones, bicycles, you name it. If you leave it unattended, it probably is going to grow legs here overnight. And that's traditionally what happens. And unfortunately, what happens as a police officer, when you go to take the report and you ask the person, what model was it, what make was it, do you know what it looked like? All they can tell you is it was a flat screen TV and it had a remote control, but I don't know what make, model, and I certainly don't know the serial number. So for us, capturing a larceny or burglary report becomes very difficult when the victim doesn't know anything about the items that were stolen. And so these types of applications are very useful to police because they allow the self-registration of personal property to include very detailed photos And then when the police, if the person becomes a victim of a crime, then really all the police has to do is get a copy of that person's inventory. Now they enter that into the state and national crime database. And now our chances of recovery and making an apprehension for someone stealing property just increases incredibly high. And then it makes our job, we're not having to take note by note description of all the things you just said. If you have it in electronic format and I'm able to transition that over to my record, then you're able to complete a police report and get that officer out for service a lot sooner. So, and one of the downsides to this is, as I've said, like with the other systems, that there's no real interface to a CAD or an RMS system. And so that's something that I'm talking to the folks from Reggie, we're working on, and that's, I think, going to be a significant enhancement to this mobile app. And so I don't want to take any more of their thunder because I know they're in the room, and so I just prefer to leave that one at that. All right. The next app that we're looking at here in our organization is a crowdsourcing and gathering app. Of course, one of the things I know that when I look at my daughter's phone, she's got folders upon folders with apps upon apps inside each of those folders. And so she's a library of information whenever I need anything, but she's got to open multiple apps sometimes to give me a single response. And so that's what most citizens and that's what most Y generation is accustomed to doing. And so one of the things that makes sense with my history working with interoperability, I remember the days when a police fire would have 4 or 5 radios just to keep in contact with the surrounding. Now what we've done is we've pre-programmed all our surrounding jurisdictions into a single radio, and instead of having multiple radios through one radio, we can talk to multiple agencies. Well, this type of app kind of does the same thing. Instead of having multiple apps to have situational awareness around a region, especially a region as large as ours, where you have people in 21 municipalities, these types of apps really streamline the number of applications that you have and give you full situation with only having one app available. And so if you could go to the next slide, where I'd like to give a very brief demo of what most people deal with when they have apps. And that is right now when somebody wants to make a report to police in a regional area like ours, and you're like right in the middle of, in between Arlington and Alexandria, where you can have up to 4 or 5 different police departments, you're sitting there scratching your head. I need to make a report to the police, but who do I call? And so you have all these applications that you could possibly either report an incident to the police, whether it's a traffic backup, a crash, whatever the case is, you often have to open up multiple apps in order to report a single incident. And so now through the use of and of course that's when we deal with that and most people get frustrated. They'd rather say, listen, this is just too complex. I'm just not going to report it to the police because I have to deal with too many applications. Using an app that has horizontal deployment, if you report it to one single application and it touches all the surrounding municipalities if they're subscribers, now one person virtually notified a region of an incident, whether it's a tree down or a barricade or a house fire. One single update on this app notified multiple publicly. And so now you have true situational awareness of what's going on without having to use too many applications. So in closing, I just wanted to go over the pros and cons that we've been witnessing and experimenting with here in our organization. I think there are obviously more pros and cons. We're optimistic about deploying mobile apps in our law enforcement agency here, especially since we're dealing with the generation that's more likely to report an incident to us over a mobile app than they are likely to pick up the phone. So that's the direction that we're headed. So we need to keep up with that generation. In the world that we police today, we're doing more with less personnel. And if a citizen is capturing evidence for me, now I no longer have to possibly send an evidence technician to copy that video or that photo. That citizen copied it for me and send it in to the call center. Now I have it available to me as evidence and not having to rely on that personnel to do that. Having situational awareness, most of us come from large regions. I know there where you're at. I was at the Gasparilla Festival a couple years ago. I was a guest of Chief Castor and Chief Bennett, and I saw all the and all the networking that they had with surrounding jurisdictions. So I know that large areas can't do it with a single app. So having horizontal deployment of applications gives you very effective and very efficient situational awareness in a large region. And then finally, making first responders safer by giving them more information is obviously the highest priority of deploying a mobile app. As I said earlier, the downsides of that is just staffing. I can't say enough. Having been a call center and having been a PSAP director, I know that staffing is nationwide. It just wasn't. I'm sure some in Tampa, where they have a shortage of Tampa's, and that's no different than what we're experiencing here. And so when you deploy these type of apps, aware that it's going to cause additional volume to your short staffing as it is. Requires a well thought out approach, because if it's not well thought out in the approach, it will start calling in life-threatening emergencies over mobile apps, and we very much need the E911 telephony system for life-threatening. And the last thing, and I've said this before, but that's just a real true interface with our CAD and RMS systems, because the last thing we want to do is enhance something at the front end, but then create more work for people doing data entry on the back end. So if there is a clean and seamless interface between the mobile apps and our traditional CAD RMS programs, I think that's the real solution to this. So I think if we could work on those cons as I see them, these deployments would be very effective and very useful for our public. So that's my story in Alexandria, Virginia.
Thank you very much, Chief. Okay, we're going to swap over to Andrea, who's going to present her slides momentarily. Talk into this. No.
While they're doing that, who in this room has mobile apps for their agencies? Do most of you have them? Just a few? Who in the room has, besides TPD people, has the TPD mobile app on their phone right now? Oh, I have something for you. You want to come and show it to me? We're on the honor system. We're in law enforcement. It's all yours. I have two more for later, just so you know, and these are coins that two of our officers have made, and they started a nonprofit, and the proceeds from the sale of these coins go to give scholarships for people to attend the law enforcement academy. So they're doing their good thing. So two more coming up in a little bit. Are you ready?
Set to go.
You just want to switch the projector.
Yep. Yep.
You're off.
Like I said earlier, 2 years ago, the chief came to our office and said, I want a mobile app. In starting to research companies, I'm sure things are very different now than they were back then. Back then, 2 years ago, there were really only 3 companies that were doing law enforcement specific mobile apps. And in reaching out, I felt, and our office felt, that we needed someone who knew law enforcement. We didn't want someone who was starting from scratch. You know, there's always going to be problems, but we wanted little problems and we wanted it launched quickly because we knew technology changes so quickly, and 3 months later there'd be new things to add, and that's exactly what has happened. So the first thing I think before you determine if you want an app or not is, what is your goal in getting a mobile app? That was the first question that we sat down and talked about. What are we trying to accomplish? And we'd had such success with social media, in our videos, that we knew that we just wanted another way for our community to get in touch with us, to be able to give us tips on crimes, where they could see surveillance video, see our most wanted. So our goal was to interact with the community more, just another way. I mean, everyone has a preferred method that they like to reach out to people. I know I don't like to pick up the phone and call anyone. There's a lot of people who don't like to do that as well. I'm embarrassed to say it, and I'm a PIO. But I like going to apps, and I saw businesses that I liked the apps. So in starting to reach out to the companies, once you determine your goal, you need to look. A lot of the companies have very limited options for icons or menu options. So you need to look to make sure that that company has the menu options that you're looking for. And in picking our company, the biggest thing that the chief is she wants a way for people to contact us to submit tips. And I remember talking to the mobile app developer, because we have a tip submit and anonymous tip. And I remember him saying, how many ways do you need people to contact you? And it was a huge deal that there was an anonymous way and a regular way. And he's like, but you can do that within the regular way. But it was very important to our chief, and when our chief wants something, that's how it is. So we chose the company we chose at the time because they had the most ability to pick your own menu options. They were willing to customize a little bit more than some of the others. Another huge, and this is not knocking any company because everyone's needs are different, but another huge factor for us was we wanted people going into the iTunes and the Google store, and we wanted them searching the Tampa Police Department, and we wanted a Tampa Police Department badge, icon, whatever on their phone. We didn't want to download another app that you search within that app to find the Tampa Police Department. I think that there's many benefits to both ways, but that's what our needs were, and in branding our organization, we wanted it to be the Tampa Police Department. So the most important thing I would think of is look at the menu options, ask if there's an ability to customize, and if there's not, make sure you're happy with what those menu options are. I've learned a lot about mobile apps, probably not nearly enough as what really goes into it, but it's a big deal to customize, especially if a company is picking a specific field like law enforcement. They want to do something that's going to benefit all of their clients and not just one. We've had the ability to do some things that have just benefited us, which apparently is a very big undertaking to do. I think the most important thing is interview the company and feel comfortable with who you're dealing with, because I think there's a lot of promises out there that don't get fulfilled. But most importantly, call the other agencies who have that company. At the time that we were signing up with the company we chose, they had 3 law enforcement agencies. I called all 3 of them. And I think, is Santa Ana here? I thought I saw them somewhere. Maybe they're not. They were the first law enforcement agency that this company worked with, and I called them. I called them to ask what their challenges were, and since we've launched our app, I've probably had 24, maybe more, law enforcement agencies contacting me, asking me the same questions that I asked. So it's very important because I was able to learn from their mistakes so that we didn't make the same mistakes. Fortunately, though, in working with the company, they learned the mistakes dealing with the Santa Ana Police Department, and then I think, I don't know, some other sand place in California, in Palm Springs. Those were the 3 agencies. So I talked to all 3 of them, and they had worked out kind of the kinks with those 3 agencies. So we benefited by being the 4th one. And then you can go on to the next slide. Things to keep in mind with your mobile app: the more interactive you make it, the more it is to manage. I learned that very quickly. So we've kind of streamlined things a little bit more where they're linked up to our news feeds, and we have the social media icons, which we always had, but I had this vision, and Derek, I don't know where he went, Derek shut it down once he came and was working with us, because it really became time intensive with constantly adding the most wanted and trying to keep things updated and continually running through the system to make sure they're still the most wanted. And we're actually going to be making changes to that because it has become too time consuming. But having the ability to link up to your website and other accounts makes it much easier. One of the coolest features on ours is the push notifications. So when we have a big crime spree or something, depending on how you're signed up for the app on your phone, you can get those push notifications. You can get an alert, however you determine you want it to go out, and however they determine, set up on their phone, how they want the push notifications. So that's a really cool feature. And then this is the part where these guys over here are sighing, our wonderful communication supervisors. This is something that we learned along the way, because I think the other 3 agencies didn't have as big of an issue of this as our chief had. You have to have a path. So for instance, when that tip goes in through the app, where is it going? Who's getting it? That was a huge issue for the chief, because it was just going to me. And I am 24/7, but I do sleep. So that was a concern. Even though we had a message on there, you know, this is not for emergencies, this is not 911, there was a lot of concern that someone would use it for an emergency, and then we don't see it for 8 hours, and there's going to be criticism for that. Even though every legal disclaimer is out there, it was a big concern. So after a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, a lot of trying to figure out what was best, we created an email account that is tpdcomsupervisor@tampagov.net, and all of the emails go to these great supervisors over here in their inbox, and then they dispatch it as necessary. So I would say 9 times out of 10 it's not an emergency, and they're just forwarding the email to the district, or sometimes they're dispatching an officer. You know, it's a lot of like, there's someone illegally parked at this location. We have several very heavy app users who use the app for every complaint that they have within the police department, every bad neighbor, everything. But we have had some really good things. For instance, Gasparilla, which the chief mentioned in his presentation. It's a huge event that we have every year in January. During that event, we were promoting the app the week prior. If you see something, say something. After the Boston bombings, we were concerned about something similar happening. So we used the app, telling people, take a picture, send it to us through the app. And Derek was working in the JOC. All these federal names, JIC, JOC, I get them all confused. But he was working the JOC, taking those tips in real time. And we were asking people to send those pictures, because they had the geocodes on them where we would know the location where those pictures were taken. So that was a very good tool for us, and we plan to use it for other big events that we have. I think that's it. I do want to say that the first two people who tweet at Tampa PD the link to our app, I have 2 more of these for you too. So at some point, we'll figure out who you are. So if you're the first person, second person, just yell out and we'll get these to you. And that's it.
Great, thank you very much. Get out those phones, start tweeting. It'll come up on the screen on both sides.
Yeah, the first one we see on the screen.
Okay, now we're going to switch over to the private side. And Claude, why don't you go through your app once we switch over to his slides. And I hope some good questions are coming to mind. I've got a couple while we're switching over to him. First off, being the intrepid entrepreneur that I am, you heard Chief Reyes talking earlier, I think clearly there's a new piece of software that needs to be written, and that is software for 911 operators to translate tweets from teams into comprehensible language so you can actually respond to it. Right? There's a software package that needs to happen, because I see tweets from kids and I don't know what the heck they're talking about. You also talked about the customer branded apps. Actually, from the software side, in a lot of cases, it's not that hard. We're dealing with 5 or 6 or 7 different departments. You should, as the company, you should be able to customize that for as many departments, depending on what your particular app does. You have them going? Great. Claude, you're on.
So I've spent most of my career in technology. And one of the early things I learned was a law written by a man named Gordon Moore. And Gordon Moore's law was every 2 years functionality will double and price will be cut in half. And that loop is going to go on until you reach 0. What's happened with the advent of the internet and then the ability to distribute technology, very, very powerful technology through smartphones, is that that process is accelerated even further. So with that, let me just give you a minute of background on VizSafe. Our team has actually been together for about 13 or 14 years. We started a company in 2000 called LiveWave. LiveWave was, our original concept was IP-based video monitoring of public spaces. And some of our early customers were organizations like WMATA, the Phoenix Skyport, and others. So we developed these surveillance systems that were had as a characteristic the ability to hand off control of a camera inside a subway station to a first responder with a handheld device. So it was a fairly novel, extraordinary thing in the early 2000s to be able to do that. We went on to enrich the system so that the sensor network could perceive not just movement and move a camera towards where there was motion taking place, but also chemical sensors and radiologic sensors and biologic sensors and so forth. We created this technology called First View, which is actually still in use today. It's a sensor management platform, and it's, I don't want to say that it's a standard, but it's very broadly distributed within DHS and DoD. In the mid-2000s, 2006 actually, we sold the company to a much larger firm, a company called Smiths Group. It's a British conglomerate. They have a division called Smiths Detection, which we were made a part of, and that gave us access to a lot more customers and a lot more resources in order to be able to do the kind of development that we wanted to do. A lot of the team, I wasn't among it, but a lot of the team stayed with the company for 5 years with Smiths, growing that business into a very, very substantial piece of Smiths. And about a year or a year and a half ago now, the original founder of LiveWave, Peter Motter, and I got together and started to talk about, he was leaving Smiths because the entrepreneur bug had bitten again. And we started to talk about what we might do next. I've been involved in some other security-related companies, one in particular called Salient Stills, which developed those images that you saw of the Tsarnaev brothers that came out of video streams but were 35mm quality images. Those were salient still images created by the FBI. So we started to talk about what we wanted to do, and we got pretty quickly focused on two important sort of anchor data points. One was the massive growth of social networks. There's just no denying, I mean, most people in this room are using Facebook and Twitter for the distribution of information, and you're doing that because it's extremely broadly distributed and very, very well accepted. And then the second anchor data point was the ubiquitous existence of cameras with incredible smartphone technology. So we got really focused on that. When we first looked at the app business, we saw what Chief Reyes was referring to. The 10 apps you see up there are all in use in the 15 square mile urban national capital region. So all of these apps are available to report every manner of police-related activity in a 15 square mile area with millions of users. So for us, the lesson from that was that that is a strategy that means that every law enforcement agency has to spend a great deal of money on server-side costs. Every single one of those apps has a different user interface. Every citizen in the community being served by those 10 apps every citizen has to think to himself, which one do I need? Do I need the one for WMATA? Should I get the one for the DC police? What about the FBI app? Do I have to learn all of those? And how do I know in a moment when I see something that's important and I want to be able to communicate with first responders, how do I know which one to pick up? And it actually, in our view, gets a little worse than that, because what happens is you end up with siloed functionality, so that you have this wild disparity in what can be done on one app versus what can be done on another. Some apps are simply text messaging in tips. Other apps are doing more, and some have alert systems, and some even have round-trip, two-way communication. So that's a further level of confusion. And anytime, anyone who's in the consumer products business will tell you, if you create an environment where consumers are confused, where they have too many choices, the choice they'll make is none. That's just the consequence of too many choices. So, and then finally, the biggest thing from our perspective about those apps is that they really do not take advantage of social networks in the way we mean them. Now, I know a lot of these apps have the capability of posting to Facebook or posting to Twitter or posting to Instagram, but what they don't do is create a community of people around that app to support the community in which they live or the community in which they work. So based on that, what some call it insight, others call it our position, we went in a different direction. We made the decision that, Scott? Oh, there we go. It's my fault, not Scott's. So we made the decision that what we were going to create was an integrated social platform to enhance community safety and well-being. And so the three pieces of the technology are cloud-based storage, secure military-grade encryption, cloud-based storage, an app which gives the user, whether they're a police officer, fireman, first responder, or a citizen, the ability to decide whether they're going to reveal themselves or not reveal themselves. So there's an absolute capacity for anonymity. We created the technology in such a way that any images, and we're very focused on visual images because we think that that's very important in increasing situational awareness. So we created the technology such that the image is never resident on the device. So you capture it, but it streams directly to the cloud. And the benefit of that, particularly for first responders, is that it renders your device not discoverable in a legal proceeding because the evidence isn't on the device. So all your personal information is never at risk of being revealed. So our strategy was one app, one user interface, but for every agency. So the way that you're able to do that is, as a first step, as a user, whether you're a first responder monitoring events or you're a citizen anxious to participate by contributing incident reports, you set geofences. So an example of that could be you live in Hillsborough and you create a geofence for the community where you live. You work in downtown Tampa, you create another geofence for that. Your child goes to school in Miami, you create a geofence around that, which allows you then to monitor every incident report as a citizen or a first responder in those communities that you share. You then get to choose what channel, we call them channels, but they're really categories of incidents. Are you interested in automobile accidents, mass transit? Are you interested in fire? Are you interested in police activity? Are you the ASPCA and interested in animal rescue? Are you an environmental watchdog group and interested in receiving reports about environmental abuse? So you get to choose what the filter is of the content that you get sent to you, alerted to you on your device, which is the final thing. You get to receive the alerts that you want to get. So you don't have to have the application open. If it's on your device, it'll ding when a new report comes in that's relevant to you. You then have the choice of opening it, looking at that, and what you will find when you do that is it's timestamped, it's geolocated, you can actually see the incident on a map, so timestamped, geolocated, and visual. So that combination of things we think is pretty valuable. So let me give you one quick example. We introduced our technology. We've been trialing it for over a year. We trialed it with the Port Authority, Rhode Island Emergency Management, some school systems, and others. But on the morning of the Boston Marathon this year, at 6:30 in the morning, there was a 30-second report about our technology, that it was available to be used to enhance race safety. Within a few minutes, we had hundreds of downloads. We'd not done anything in Boston at that point. By the time the race started, there were thousands of people using the app who were spectators or fans. And the app was being monitored by the FBI and sorry about that, and the Mass State Police. And there were 100 incidents reported in the course of Boston Marathon race day. One of those incidents is the one that you see in the center here. Anywhere in a restricted race zone, if you carried a large bag, that bag had to be tagged. An ordinary citizen captured this video of another fan carrying a bag that had not been tagged. Now, turned out to be benign, but the point is there was no other mechanism available to the FBI or the state police in real time, or the Boston Police Department, that could have seen that. And that's why there's been a lot of reference to last year's marathon tragedy, which influenced us in profound ways. But one of the things that was said in the report by Rick Delorier, who is the special agent in charge of the investigation of last year's bombing, was that this capability to take a photograph or a video, transmit it in real time, and have it available to any law enforcement agency that wishes to receive those kinds of alerts is extremely valuable. And that's been the underpinning of our strategy. So with that, I'm going to get to the last bit, which is we've also created some very, very powerful tools specifically for law enforcement. But the first and most important piece is use the infrastructure you have. Our model is that the technology is free. It's free in the same way that Facebook is free to you and that Twitter is free to you. Our goal is to create a very large audience, and that will be the strategy for creating a revenue opportunity for the business. So you can use, your officers can use their personal devices right now. You can turn the system on immediately. It's a two-way platform. You can share, not only can citizens share with first responders, you can use the platform to send alerts. And you can send the alerts in a broadcast mode or a narrowcast mode, meaning if an autistic child wandered off from a specific neighborhood, you can target that neighborhood. And you can target it with visual imagery of the child who's walked off. So it's very powerful, very pinpoint, but it can also be, you want the entire state of Florida to get it. You can do either of those things with the same technology, no changes, no modifications. The reports are geolocated, they're mapped, they're filtered by incident, by type, by date, and by time. Our communication and storage is military-grade encryption. This is the same quality of data capture and data storage that we employed with FirstView, which is, as I say, being used in DoD and DHS. Our technology is very easy to use, very intuitive. It's easy. It's available now. There's no infrastructure cost, no new hardware, no new software, no fees, no upgrades. We do all of that, and we do it continuously. And then finally, as I say, it protects device privacy so that your officers can use their personal devices without fear of their personal information also being exposed. So there you go.
Thank you. Am I back on? There we go. Back to you. Your mic's a little bit. There we go. I'm trying to find a place where I don't create feedback. Stand over here. Stand all the way over there? Okay. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about my app briefly, and then we're going to leave plenty of time for Q&A. Right there. Is that good? Great. So I'm going to try and hit on a couple of things that all of the other presenters have talked about, and I'm going to do it by showing you a real example. So how many of you have a detailed inventory of all of the valuables in your home, a personal home inventory for either insurance or how many of you have a personal home inventory, detailed with pictures and descriptions and whatnot? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, not a lot of hands, and this is law enforcement. Okay, there are 58 apps out there that will help you create a home inventory app, a home inventory for insurance purposes. 58. So when Claude talked about the confusion in the marketplace, which one do you pick? Now that is very similar to our app. And again, picking up on what Claude said about Moore's Law, which is functionality will double in price if you cut it in half, our app is free. We will actually let you create home inventory for free, and I'll talk about the back-end business model in just a moment. So you can download the app, and what we did was when we went to the market, we started looking at other different apps and other different registries. What we found was there was a registry for bicycles. Probably you're all familiar with the National Bike Registry, right? Okay. You know there's a registry for guitars. There's a registry for cameras. There's a registry for chainsaws. Ask me later, and I'll show you my certification. I'll tell you why there's a registry for chainsaws. Problem is, none of those databases talk to each other. So if I lost my bike and my chainsaw, I'd have to basically file with 2 different organizations. That's not helpful. So what we did was create an app that made it really easy for people to create an inventory of all of their valuables. So you simply take a picture of your item, put in a description, take a photograph of the tag on the back if you want to do that, put in a value and a purchase date, and you're done. So you can create an inventory, thousands of items in your home, in your office, wherever it may be, and that's all now secure in the cloud. Again, 58 apps that do that. Where we're a little bit different was we realized what we did was we looked at the FBI crime statistics, and we found that when items are lost or stolen, there is a 7% chance that you're going to get your items back. Okay, 7%. And a lot of those other tools are trying to figure out a way to make that go from 7 to 8%, to 9%, to 10%, to a little gator. It's still only 10%. 93% of the time you're not getting your stuff back. So what we do is, the premium service, if you lose your stuff, or if you have it stolen, we will actually deliver to you a coupon so that you can go down to the local Best Buy and buy a new phone with your iPhone. That's how we make our money. And again, back to Claude said with Moore's Law, the price coming down to 0, that is all free and available to you. The upgrade for the app is $1.99. And what I'm about to show you, which is our police portal, when you hit the stolen goods report, everything I'm about to show you is free to law enforcement. So this now is our portal, and what I want to do is do a quick simulation of this particular. What is the zip code? 33602. Nope. What I'm going to do is in real time, I've already submitted a stolen goods report here. And again, back to some of the things that were mentioned. Our stolen goods report, what we've done is we've created a form that actually comports to FBI NCIC reporting standards. So what we're doing is we're pushing data entry out to the users. Back to what Chief Reyes was saying about not very many of you, but an awful lot of us. If we can get the consumer to fill out 30% of the form, 40% of the form, 50% of the form, when you actually get it, now it's a lot easier for you to process. Now we don't expect them to put in the NCIC code, because they don't necessarily know that, but they can tell the difference between a forced entry versus an unforced entry, and now we're starting to talk about police lingo, we're starting to put things into the workflow, back to what Andrea was talking about. This is how you guys operate already, let's bake that into the app. One of the other things that we do is we ask you several questions. Was there direct contact with the criminal? If yes, then what pops up on our app is an interstitial that says, wait a minute, Reggie is not emergency. Call 911 if you are in danger, and there's a button right there. And it works, I know, I tested it, I called 911, I had to apologize, but I had to make sure as the head of technology that this thing actually worked. So we've actually got multiple areas in the app where when you're filling things out, if we feel as though this is a user who's using our app in a way that they shouldn't, as in they should be calling 911, they're going to get an interstitial page. Was there a weapon involved, a gun, a knife, or other, etc.? If the answer is yes to any of those, boom, you're going to get a pop-up window, okay? Then when you fill out your form, what it also says is, when I hit go, another window pops up that says, hold on a second, you're about to fill out a formal police report. This information will be available to any law enforcement. Are you really, really sure you want to do this? Now, what I want to do is, I want to get back to, hang on. Oh, shoot. Let me go back home. What I'll do is I'll just show you the example here of Boston. So because I'm logged in as me, what happens is when you would log in as law enforcement, this is what you would see. Civilians never see any of this information here. I'm logged in, so I get my zip code, which is actually Cambridge, Mass., plus approximately 50 or 25 miles. So what you're looking at here is a quick dashboard. And again, back to what Chief Reyes was talking about with respect to making fast, good decisions, you'll notice that things are in either yellow or blue, or if I scroll down, I think we have some other examples here. They're on another page. Could be in white, which means you quickly can tell, okay, the ones in yellow are unverified. If it was a white background, it would be verified. And you can also determine quickly how important this particular incident is. So in this case, with the little clipboard, that simply means I'm only filing for insurance purposes. How many times have you gotten a report where somebody's only filing for insurance? One of my favorite quotes from a trooper from Nevada, when we were demoing actually the alpha of this, he said, this thing's fabulous because here's my problem. I get 6 troopers for 800 square miles. Some little old lady calls and says, my house got robbed and I got to send somebody out for a 5-hour drive. So I don't mind that. What I mind is the gas. These cars don't get very good gas mileage. So I can send somebody all the way out. So if I can get a report that says, hey, the only reason I'm filling this out is for insurance purposes, and I can maybe deal with this in the back office, and then next time the trooper is out there, we can have them swing by and fill out a form or something like that, that makes a lot more sense to me. But in this particular case, because the user input this data, they said there was a gun involved, hey, we might want to take a look at this one. So now let's drill down on, let's say, Aurora. Let's take a look at Aurora's individual case. So this was a bag snatching. There's your detailed incident, downtown crossing in Boston. Again, as Eddie was saying, and this depends on how much the user has put in, but now you've got a picture of the product, a value, a description, victim information, incident location, etc. And depending on our time, I'm going to try and do this real fast. You know what? I'd rather get to your questions. So if anybody wants to see a more detailed demo, please stop by the table. Again, this is all free, so we're not selling anybody, so just come by. But the idea here is now you're looking at this, law enforcement is seeing this. Only you can verify this. Once it gets verified, soon, before the end of the year, we hope, it will do an automatic update to NCIC. It will automatically update your RMS system. You can then take additional actions, and I can pass this PDF report. So as soon as this report got filed, the user got emailed a PDF of this complete report. As soon as it gets verified, that gets reported again. You can forward this to anybody in any agency via an email. That other officer or agent can get a PDF, so even if they're not on Reggie, that's okay. They're getting an email, they're getting a PDF they can read on their phone or their tablet. They can forward it on to somebody else. This is all HIPAA compliant, so we are capturing all the information, and once it's in the database, it cannot be changed again. And we also have a close capability for those cases where you can begin to do forensic research back on cases that have happened in the past once you put it in the data, and you can actually begin to close out that case. Whole idea is we want to have a completely electronic format. We also want to assume that the user or the officer, depending on where they are or depending on the department, has got a workaround, because not everybody's as wired as everybody else is. And again, some of the examples that
have come to us. We gave a presentation to the New Hampshire Police Chiefs Association. They want to adopt this statewide, and especially the smaller departments like this, because of the price point. As one guy said, I've got 2 constables and a part-time officer. He said, I ain't got no money for software. So this thing has got to be free. So all of this is free and available. It is available now. The app is available. Did you take my phone? No. What did you do with my phone? Somebody has my phone.
Can we do questions now?
Yeah, we'll do questions now. So, who's got any questions for anybody on the panel? I'm not allowed to move, am I?
Yeah, you can move. You can go
I
over
can move now? Okay. So, any questions on either the apps that you've seen, or actually what would also be interesting is, and I know some people, is there anybody here who's in an evaluation process right now? Are you looking at something you haven't deployed yet, you're evaluating a couple different vendors for anything in particular? Anybody engaged in the eval process right now? What are you working on? A what? A mobile app for? Tip reporting, mapping. How many different vendors are you looking at? Started off with 8 and down to 2, okay. And what are some of the key criteria that you're looking at? You've been learning? Okay, I don't want to put you on the spot. Let me make one comment picking up on something that Andrea mentioned earlier, and Chief, you and Andrea want to pick up on this in just a second. From the vendor side, there's, especially when you're a startup, there's a critical moment when you get your first customer, when you get somebody to actually try out your app, and usually it's a trial period. Okay, if they don't have any other customers, don't go buy the app. Make sure that you're doing it on a trial basis. If they do have a couple of customers, that's nice validation. But coming from the vendor side and having helped invent and bring to market various different tools, including a couple for grid management, so I've dealt with very high-level security as well. Don't not say no because the provider doesn't necessarily have all of the detailed experience. They don't have 12 people with top security clearance and whatnot. You may find an innovative app out there, and the sooner we can all begin to work together, the better. I think actually, Eddie, you touched on this in an earlier presentation where you talked about engaging with the vendor while they were building their minimal viable product and working with them at the same time. So can we get Eddie back on audio?
Am I live?
You have to unmute. Eddie? Eddie, excuse me, you're on mute. Eddie, you're on mute.
How do you copy me now?
While Eddie's trying to fix that, Andrea, do you want to, can you pick up on that in terms of, well, you guys did your app internally.
No, we hired a company.
Okay.
We hired a company, and before we started calling companies, we downloaded a bunch of apps. I mean, first it was a Google search law enforcement app to see what agencies had them, and then testing out the different apps, what functions we liked, what functions we didn't like, then trying to figure out who those companies were. Some of the companies were easy to figure out, some of them weren't. Because from a PIO perspective, I think we all know that once you start calling salespeople, no offense, it's not fun. So that's the process we took. Let's figure out who we like, and we can eliminate a couple of them. But back then there were only 3. I eliminated one right away, and then I wanted to eliminate the other one, but my boss required me to come with 2. So
you came with 2.
I came with 2.
There you go.
And you know, the one we chose was for a very specific reason.
Yep.
And I ended up calling 2 companies, and then the other company still calls me 2 years later, and I each time say, you know, we have an app, well, maybe you should ditch them and come to us, and
these
that's
sales.
not out of the question if new things come up.
Sure. I think we have Chief Reyes on the phone.
Yes, how do you hear me, Ken?
Great.
Okay, so for us, as I said earlier, we've been working with a company here by the name of VizSafe. They're located here right next door to us in Arlington, Virginia. Actually, one of the vendor representative was a survivor from the Virginia Tech shooting, and so it gave us an opportunity to start working with them during the development phase. I've been to their organization, their facility, a couple times, and actually I think working with the vendors makes the product better because we invite them here to our facility. They actually see the PSAP, the 911 center, our actual working environment. You know, what it looks like in the textbook, what it actually feels like in a police car or fire truck are two totally different things. And so working directly with the vendor, not only does it help them improve their product, it helps them deliver a product that we really use and we really need. So I think it's win-win on both sides.
And let me echo that, because Eddie's app in a previous generation of what you've seen is an awful lot better because of the comments that he made. So that's one of the other key things is, even if the company might not necessarily have all of the law enforcement credentials you're looking for, I would say look for a company where the individuals involved have got a little bit of experience in terms of listening to their customer. Have they been able to morph their technology and morph their business model? So any other questions or any other apps? Yes, sir.
Question for Andrea. Once you had your app developed, how did you push it out there so that people would start adding it to their smartphones?
We actually did kind of a soft launch because the company we used at the time, their Droid app version, they weren't ready for that yet. So we had about a 3-month period where we just had the iPhone app waiting for the Droid app, and there was so much pressure. When's that coming? Because they kept saying it's going to be in a couple weeks, turned into a couple months. But once we had both platforms, because it was very important that we had both platforms, even though at least back then, I can't remember what the percentage was, but it was very high of app users are iPhone app users, not Droid. But still, it was very important that both were available. We did a news conference, which actually I was going back through the coverage because I actually brought a couple of video clips that there's just on my phone. And I was remember how much coverage there was on just local video coverage. And the way we did that is, just launching an app wasn't that big of a deal, even though we were the first law enforcement agency in our area to do it. We brought a case that we did put video on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter that was solved through social media. And we used that case for the story behind the mobile app. We've had such success with social media. This is our next step in technology, and we're going to be doing this. Then we use social media like crazy to push it out. And the number of people who have our app, it fluctuates. Right now, I think we're about 4,000 iPhone and Android, but that changes. For Gasparilla, it went up. Our big event. People delete apps from the phone, they reinstall them. Even me, I work with the Tampa Police Department, and I delete it and reinstall it. So that's important to know that number fluctuates.
Eddie's got to go in just a couple of minutes. Does anybody have any questions for Chief Reyes before we lose him? No questions? Thank you, sir. Great to see you again.
Thank you very much, Ken, and a very warm welcome to all of you there at the conference. Anytime you are in the National Capital Region, to stop here by the Alexandria Police Department. My closing remarks is going to be, don't underestimate the value and the talent of people like the folks that are there in the room. We buy a lot of commercial off-the-shelf products, but let me tell you, our cops that are geeks here really customize our apps and make them the useful tools that we really need. So we have always relied on our own in-house people to take a commercial product off the shelf like is being presented here, and then our people here enhance it even more. So tremendous value with a lot of in-house potential there. So have a great conference, and I look forward to joining you live next year.
Thank you, Eddie. So that raises a couple of other quick thoughts, and let me pick up on something that Andrea mentioned. Most of these apps that are out there are free. If they're not, they should be. More than 94% of apps are free, and any app that's over $2, I believe there are fewer than 6%, maybe even 5%. So many of these apps are available. They're available on whatever platform you're currently working on. So I really encourage you to go ahead and download them, play with them, work with them, see what works for you. And I think to a point that was made earlier by an officer from Tampa, I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't get your name, but one of the things that the developers need to remember is that when you're looking at an app and when we're developing an app, we're not developing an app for the people in this room. We're just not. you're not my user. My user is a lot younger. There's a new terminology. How many of you have heard the term digital native? People who are, you heard the term digital native, people who live in, okay, there's a new term. Mobile native. There are people for whom this is their computing environment. That's all it is. Thank you, I can see again. Wow. This is their environment. This is what they live on, the kids today. So again, when you are evaluating apps, when you're looking at vendors, think about that. And again, I really do encourage you, whether it's ours or whether anybody else's, not just pitching to anybody, go download those apps, see what works, and think about it. And again, two words come to mind that you were talking about earlier, Andrea, and that's called workflow. That's what we call it. I'm not sure if you call it the same thing. It's how you go from point A to point B in the process. Do you want to comment a little bit about workflow and how you guys built thinking through step 1 to step 2 to step 3, both in terms of the app but also in terms of the user?
Well, we designed our app actually with both law enforcement professionals and citizens in mind. One of the great under-leveraged resources is a nation full of policemen in squad cars and walking beats, all of whom have smartphones on their person and are very often discouraged from using them because of the risk that comes with using a personal device. So from our perspective, that was a big part of our thinking about workflow, that we needed a way to make the tool valuable that didn't put officers' personal information at risk. So I think there are lots of examples, I think, like that. I did want to say one thing, though, actually two things. The first is that there aren't any free, for the most part, there are not any free apps. That there's a server-side cost that's subsidizing the distribution of what appears here elsewhere. Somebody is paying to put that on the server. And so the idea that apps are free, they're great for, it's great for experimentation, but when you're deciding to adopt an app, you're going to write a check, and the check is going to be for the management of the server. Not in our case, by the way, but in virtually every other case. And then the second thing, which gets me to the second thing, which I say with a little bit of humor, we spent a lot of time with the Port Authority Police Department just prior to the Super Bowl. And it was an extraordinary experience because we had our first meeting with the CTO of the Port Authority, which is one of the biggest police agencies in the country, on December 22nd, and we were live and running for the Super Bowl, and we didn't actually get the authorization from their channels until the week of the Super Bowl. So it was in less than 5 days that we brought the whole system up, and we brought it up as a private network just for Port Authority. So only the policemen were using it. They reported a couple of hundred incidences in the course of the Super Bowl. The humorous part is one of the hardest things we had to overcome is that we're not a vendor. We're not selling you anything. You don't have a contractual vendor relationship with Facebook or Twitter. You just use it, and we're the same. So getting the organization to understand that we're not trying to sell you something. This technology is available. You can turn it on tomorrow. You don't need us to do it. It's available and it works. And we're growing in terms of users about 1,000 a week with no promotion, no effort. And part of that is that there are law enforcement organizations all around the country, not in a consolidated way, but in little pockets that are using it to communicate with their community. And that the more they do that, the more passionate the users become about becoming nodes on the security network in their community, which is, at the end of the day, our goal.
No, all right. Any other questions, comments from the panel? Yes, sir. That's a real good question. Let me just repeat it for the folks in the ether. The question is, are there apps out there that you can customize for your own police department? I'm assuming to some degree the question is to your own. Yes, but you want to do it so that you are basically branding your own police department. So it's in essence your app, but you're running on my engine, correct?
Yeah, I would be our icon, but it's your engine, your
Right.
app.
It depends on the individual app, but for many, yes. The requirements to do it are not significant. I think the reason that most vendors might not want to do it is understand that in the app world to get, where are you from, sir?
Orlando.
Where?
Orlando.
Orlando. How many folks in Orlando? A couple of million?
Yes.
Doesn't even register on the app scale. Doesn't even register. I need 10, 15, 20, 100 million in order to go raise the venture capital that I need to build my company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's an exaggeration, but to build up an app, so they will probably try and have some level of private of their own label in there. But I think it's a very good question. There's no reason that there should not be more customization. Again, back to the earlier comments that I don't want people coming to Reggie. I really, really don't. If they're in danger, I want them calling 911. I think that is the most effective, efficient communications method in the country. I can't imagine anything else that works as well everywhere throughout the entire country. Why would you mess with that? That said, getting to, let's say it's tips or a video or something along those lines, you probably want them coming to your app. And that certainly makes a lot of sense. Again, it depends on the individual vendor. But it's not my short answer is it's not a daunting task to do that. So if that's an imperative for you, as you folks you really wanted that Tampa badge on there, make it a requirement. And most vendors will say, yes, sir.
Can I ask, do you use Twitter and Facebook?
Yes.
Do you have branded versions of them?
No.
And the reason you don't is that by being Facebook and not Orlando Facebook, they get everybody.
Right.
By being Orlando Facebook, they become something smaller and less valuable.
Right.
That's for our purposes, speaking as a marketer of social networks, that's the reason that we don't like private branding. What we do offer is private branding that are intra-departmental. So if the Orlando Police Department wanted its own internal communication systems so that you could video something in one location and send that video to other officers, we'll brand that for you so it says Orlando. But if the homepage says Orlando Police Department, it actually doesn't work to build the biggest number of participants possible. And at the end of the day, you want more nodes on the network, not fewer.
Do you want to comment on that?
I just, and everyone's perspective is different. You know, it was very important to the chief, it was very important to me and our team that it was a Tampa Police Department badge. I get, you know, what you're saying, and we looked at a company that's all they did was their app, and you had to do the drop down to find within it. And the great thing is if you go to the iTunes or Google Play Store, if it's a law enforcement agency within that app, it's, you know, it still does come up. If you type in, if I was part of that company and I typed in the Tampa Police Department, it still would come up. There's just something about picking up the phone and it's your badge, it's your city. We're not interested in, even though it's great, we're not interested in getting people from Orlando. We're not interested in getting, you know, our app is for the people in Tampa. And it's important to do that because with a bigger company with that, you have better marketing opportunities. It's important that you have marketing skills to market it in your community if you do choose to go that route. And I think we all know with our budgets and our staffing, sometimes that can be difficult. If you have a strong social media presence, that's pretty much all we use. So if you have a strong social media presence, it can be fairly easy to market it.
And there are many new tools. If you contact Facebook or Twitter, if you're talking about marketing your app, Facebook, for example, has a new program. If you are launching a new program of any kind, they will actually give you a Facebook advertising counselor for free for 30 days to help you craft an advertisement, which images are working, which ones are not, which text is working, which is not, which zip codes are working, which are not, etc. And they will help you refine your strategy, and all of that is entirely free. Twitter is the same program. LinkedIn has the same program. These social media organizations want you to be very, very successful. Any other questions for anybody? Yes, sir.
Are these applications available outside of the US?
Ours is. And if there's cell service or Wi-Fi, you can start using it. We get reports from Kathmandu, so we can get them from anywhere. Pull tweet. One of the things that we are doing for pull tweet is if you include the hashtag VizSafe, your pull tweets will automatically be posted to the VizSafe network.
Let me update that because Peter told me the other day, his comrade, that they changed it. So you use the pull tweet hashtag during our global police tweet-a-thon. We'll put your images or your videos up on there now.
Correct.
So he switched it over to pull
And then
tweet.
actually, now that you say
They're
it,
our sponsor for pull tweets. We're going to have a worldwide event on his platform on that day.
Great, and I'm sorry, let me rewind for those folks in the ether. The question was, are these apps generally available outside of the United States? In our case, not yet, but we will be by the end of the year. Most apps, will, if they're built in the United States, are probably targeting a US-based audience because that's where they can do their advertising and their sales more cost effectively. But they're also picking up on platforms that there's no reason that they shouldn't be able to go international relatively quickly. Any other questions?
I just want to say Jimmy J
Oh, sorry.
and Slaying My Giants.
Jimmy J?
You two are the first two who tweeted with all the specifications.
We have winners.
So where are you, Jimmy J and Slaying My
Right over here. Here, come on up.
And if you want these, they're $10 each or 3 for $25. And our communication supervisor Eddie over there has them. So it's for a good cause. And it's just the thin blue line.
There you go. And so I guess let me just wrap up with one last thought. And I mentioned this to some folks at dinner the other night, and they thought that I was crazy, and I'm not. I've done a good amount of coaching of young startups on how to use social media to expand your business and grow your app presence and whatnot. And I tell them all, here's the $1 million secret to being successful on social media. Is everybody ready? You got your pens out? Are you ready to tweet this? Social media is social. Don't just push out content. Engage with people. Find a way where you can actually create a communication that goes from 140 characters to a much more substantive conversation. And I'll give you the best example. Lori and I met on Twitter. 2 months ago, Lori, was it? 3 months, something like that? 2-3 months ago. I happened to be tweeting, our app was about to come out, Lori was online, she found me, looked at my background, she followed me, I followed her, and this is where it leads. It sounds like a silly thing, but it really is the key to it. Social media is social. This is only a tool. You wouldn't, be doing a monologue if you were out doing community policing and you saw a bunch of kids on the street. You wouldn't just start talking at them, would you? You'd engage them. Who are you? What's your name? Let me tell you about you. You'd create a conversation and a relationship. This is only a tool for creating a relationship, and I think it's the best way to do that. So with that, unless there's any final questions, I think we will sign off.
Right. We just need 5 minutes to get Aaron up. But it's been a long panel, so take 5 if you need it. But we do have a presentation starting right away. Then we've got a nice one here after that.
Thank you.
Thank you all.